Welcome to The Current Situation, your Palmetto State political pulse. I'm your host, Joshua Gale, alongside South Carolina State House Representative Jordan Pace. Every week, our goal is to help you navigate the complex world of politics through biblically conservative perspectives. Before we jump into today's conversation, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsor.
Welcome to your serene escape on Wadmalaw Island, just minutes from historic Charleston, South Carolina. Nestled along the Wadmalaw River, this stunning 31-acre property offers a one-of-a-kind opportunity to own your private slice of paradise. Step inside this new, pond-front home designed with sophistication and comfort in mind. From the elegant architectural archways to the spacious kitchen built for entertaining and the cozy screened-in porch, this home was made for making memories. Outside, your entertaining dreams come true with a charming pergola complete with a fire pit, perfect for gathering with friends under the stars. The recently planted acreage and newly dug pond invite endless possibilities. Whether you're looking to ride horses, enjoy wildlife, or hunt, this property has something for every nature lover. And don't forget the tranquil pond at the entrance, an angler's sanctuary. Take a stroll on the community dock and watch playful porpoises swim by or wander the natural roads and trails, soaking in the beauty all around. Peace, nature, and privacy await, with a secure private entry ensuring your solitude. This is more than a home. It's a lifestyle surrounded by beauty, tranquility, and endless adventure. Your dream of low-country living starts here. Schedule your tour today with Mac Company Real Estate and experience the magic for yourself.
Welcome back, everybody. It is January 8th. It is a cold afternoon here in Charleston, South Carolina. A lot has transpired in the off season, and we have a lot to catch you up on, and a lot going on here in the world. But first of all, I want to introduce you to what Jordan has stepped into during our off season. Jordan, if you want to announce now that you are the chairman of the South Carolina
Yep.
Freedom Caucus, and tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah. So our former chairman ran for Congress last year. Unfortunately, came out very, very, very short. It was very, very close in that race. But because he ran for Congress, he didn't run for re-election in South Carolina House. So we had to fill that role. I was nominated by my colleagues and happily took up the charge to try to push the envelope in South Carolina politics in the direction that I think the voters want us to go. One of those things that also happened in the off season was the House kept a supermajority of Republicans, and the Senate now has a true supermajority as well. And there were 13 new senators elected out of 46, which is a huge a huge number over
Wow.
there as far as change in a body that doesn't change very
Right.
much. So to me, the mandate from that and the mandate from obviously the federal elections has told us that, hey, the voters want to actually move in a more conservative direction rather than the way that South Carolina's operated in the past, which is a lot of Republicans that don't necessarily vote for the best options in the state house.
Right. So just because we had a successful November doesn't mean it's time to take the foot off the gas. I think it's quite the
No.
opposite, that if we have momentum, we need to keep the momentum. And just because we did a great job of protecting some election integrity here in South Carolina and across the United States, there's more that can be done. And so kind of tell us about that. What is on the table for 2025, and what is the role of the voter? It's not just to step back and say, hey, we did our job and we voted and that's all we can do. What is ahead in 2025? What do people need to be looking out for ahead of time because there's
Yeah.
things that we can do ahead of time. What's on the table? How are they calling their representatives to say, hey, how do you plan to vote on these issues here that are going to be in front of you
Mhm.
in 2025?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, can't take the foot off the gas. The other side of the political uh, divide understands this very well. Like the left, when they win, they don't sit back and relax and sit on their laurels. They push for the policies that they said they wanted on both the activist side, the voters, and their politicians on that side. And that's not conservatives haven't been very good about doing that. Um, by nature, we're conservative. Like we just want to keep that's kind of the general idea is to conserve things. But in the situation we're in, where the progressives have pushed things so far their way, we have to push back, um, and that includes voters. So what can voters do? Yeah, vote. That's good. That was I'm appreciative of that. But call your state rep and call your state senators and tell them that you want things like eliminating the income tax. Uh, we made some good strides over the last 2 years since the Freedom Caucus formed on stuff that had laid dormant for decades. So like we got constitutional carry passed. That's great. It wasn't the best possible version of it, but it was better than some of the versions that were
Right.
thrown at us. We did get a very very small modicum of education freedom, school choice, whatever you want to call it. We got a small pilot program passed. Unfortunately, since we're on a break, the state Supreme Court ruled that ESA program was unconstitutional, which is something that I was kind of afraid of, and why I filed that refundable tax credit option as an alternative. So I'm going to refile that. There's going to be some other modifications that they're going to try to bring back the ESAs in some form, and just kind of hope that the Supreme Court changes its mind from 6 months to a year ago. Once that actually passes and matriculates to the system, um, but we got to cut taxes. Uh, the regulatory state within South Carolina, like all the regulations and burn some regulations for businesses, for insurance, for this whole list of stuff, has really come to a head, especially with liability insurance and home insurance. So and car insurance. I mean, insurance across the board. So we're looking to try to make some modifications to that to stop protecting, frankly, the trial lawyers are the only ones that are benefiting from the system as it's set up now, and that's going to take a lot of effort from grassroots to call their representatives, many of which are trial attorneys, and convince them that it's in their best interest to uh, get rid of this tort system, especially, and try to implement some creative policies to lower the cost of insurance for everybody, because that's passed along. Obviously, individuals have to pay that insurance premiums as they go up, but that's also passed along to consumers. When businesses have increases, they pass it along to consumers or they close, and that's what we've seen across the state is hundreds of small businesses, family-owned businesses for the most part, having to close because
Right.
insurance costs go
So,
up.
you know, you think of a lot of folks, and they get really interested in the drama and the attraction of a national race for president, things like
Yeah,
that, nominations,
a lot of
yeah, for
attention.
the cabinet and things like that. A lot of folks could not tell you what the daily job or the career path of their representatives are, and so it's
Hmm.
really important to know that. Is yours a divorce attorney? And what kind of business are they into, and how could they benefit from having a position as a representative, things like that, and what's
Yeah.
on the table. So I've got friends that have either been inspired by us or inspired by just kind of wanting to they want to know more, be more knowledgeable,
Hmm.
and stop playing the ignorant card on political things. So they've started joining some neighborhood groups and um,
Yeah,
some
it's great.
Republican groups that happen to be large neighborhoods, and these people are actually
Hmm.
meeting, and most of them are in the older category, but you'll start to see some younger and younger folks. Um,
Hmm.
representatives won't start making any changes until they realize that eyeballs are on them and that pressure's starting to be pushed
Yeah.
on them, and that constituents who do vote for them or support them financially, things like that, are starting to watch and pay attention. I think we're now, like I said, with the momentum, we're starting to pay attention. We're starting to have less
Yeah.
faith or trust in the government that, everything is in the best interests of the people. To really know that accountability has to be one of the greatest factors, right, in this whole thing for us to be able to benefit as we the people. So another thing that happened here in our off season was there was a vote for an open position of the House Speaker. Uh, and the Freedom Caucus had the decision to nominate Representative Bill Chumley as an alternative to current incumbent Speaker Merle Smith. And this was a bold move. Can you walk us through that thought process behind the nomination and what it signifies?
hmm Yeah. So it's fairly uncommon to uh, for a sitting speaker to get an opponent. It's at least in South Carolina. In other states, that might happen more often, but here it's pretty rare. The last time it happened was about 12 years ago when Congressman Ralph Norman was in the state house. He ran against Bobby Harrell at the time because he knew about some stuff that later came to light in the public and was trying to bring some attention to that. He got 5 votes. They were kind of known after the fact as the Norman Five back 12 years ago. So the situation we've run into for the last 2 years of this divide that has been created by the moderates within the Republican caucus, this loyalty oath, Rule 16, whatever you want to call it, uh, over the last 6 7 months, me in particular, and then several of us have been trying to discuss with leadership like how can we come to mend these bridges? Can these bridges be mended? Our main goal is to accomplish conservative, free market, biblical policies, and this created divide by the moderates, I think, is inhibiting that. It's letting them run the caucus. So, what can we do about it? Essentially, we got nowhere. I mean, we at their request, we offered several different versions of the rules, ways we could, what can we agree on? Basically, all of our attempts have thus far been rejected. Uh, those lines are still open. Like we're still trying to communicate and find a way through that. But we let them know, hey, look, if y'all can't bring us together, then we need a we need somebody who can.
Right.
Uh, and then Mr. Chumley came to me kind of through that process and told me he felt called that he needs to run. And Mr. Chumley's been there for um, 15, 16 years. He is not a loud individual. I think I've heard him go to the floor 2 or 3 times. Uh, he is a quiet statesman, family man, grandpa, owns several businesses, uh, but he's a strong believer and felt convicted.
Um,
So,
so it was a bold move. Although it was unsuccessful, what message do you think it sent?
mhm. Well, the point we were trying to make is there are many of us who are unhappy with the situation. And what I shared with leadership the last time we met was if y'all don't fix this, it's going to get
Right.
worse. And that was just basically a reinforcement of like this is the direction we're heading of a permanent, hopefully not a permanent split. We're trying to avoid that. Uh, but the reality is leadership's got to either deal with us and like talk with us and negotiate with us, or they're going to deal with the Democrats on the other side. There's 34 Democrats. There's we're quickly reaching that point in the Freedom Caucus, like the numbers on that side, and that's ultimately the decision that leadership's going to have to make is like, who do you want to deal with the most conservative members of your own party, or do you want to deal with the
Right.
Democrats? And for the last you know 15 years, they've had to deal with Democrats, but now we have a supermajority. We shouldn't have
Right.
to. We shouldn't have Democrat subcommittee chairs. We shouldn't be running Democrat bills, at light speed through
Right.
committees. hate crimes bills and stuff like that that our voters don't
Right.
want. So that's really what that was
So what
all
does it
about.
say that every single Democrat chair member or chamber member supported Speaker Merle Smith?
I think that's emblematic of the status quo for the last, recent history. That the Republican leadership has been more willing to deal with uh, or make deals with the Democrats than they have been with the most conservative members of the Republican Party. And it's not just Freedom Caucus now. I mean, the one of those moderate ringleaders basically threw out the Family Caucus chair, got him John McCravey out in the cold. He demoted him on the Judiciary Committee because John keeps pushing the envelope on protecting life. Like that's John's biggest issue, and amongst other stuff. And so the moderates within leadership, like on Judiciary in particular, I mean, these are guys who voted against safe women's sports. These are guys who voted against constitutional
Wow.
carry. Um, you know, that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with.
So people, if you get, unwavering support from Democrats, you may be a rhino. Representative Neil Collins was elected to the Ethics Committee with bipartisan support, despite a record that you've constantly criticized and things that you're talking about right now. Women,
Mm-hmm.
men and women's sports, things like that. Why, again, why is this still a thing?
Yeah, so by statute, like by law, the ethics committee has to be made up of 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats, and then the majority party is supposed to be the chair. Well, we had an issue with this because Mr. Collins, who runs as a Republican, he votes against school. He's voted against school choice, voted against Save Women's Sports and Committee. He voted against constitutional carry in the past. Um, he's an adamant adamantly against school choice measures. I mean, the guy was just well in November he was actively campaigning, like knocking doors and taking pictures on social media with a Democrat who was running for state senate, an open state senate race that was competitive, and he was supporting a Democrat. Um, like that's if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, and it's saying it's a goose, I think you got to believe your eyes and not your ears. And so that was kind of our point with the ethics thing. It was like it's supposed to be 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats. If this guy's voting with the Democrats on stuff, if he's campaigning for
Right.
Democrats, how does this not become a 6-4 now effectively a Democrat majority
Right.
committee when it's supposed to be even between Republicans and
Right. With a
Democrats?
supermajority on the Republican side.
When we have a
Where
supermajority,
and where
right?
is he from?
Pickens
Pickens County.
County.
So there's some incredible people in Pickens County. I find it
Oh
hard
yeah.
to believe that these people, if they knew that this was the case, would just be okay with that. So is it really a fact that people are literally are just ignorant to the fact of what's really transpiring, what voting records and things like that, just because somebody has an R next to their name or they have a family name that goes back or just whatever it may be, that we cannot just let a name or a an initial next to a name really lead us to believe that somebody has our best interest in mind with our and there is going to support our values in how we're voting. Um,
Yeah.
I've got another question here for you. So Representative Joe White, the preferred candidate from your perspective, how do you think this leadership approach would have differed? Obviously, bringing it more into the conservative values of things, but what difference would have that have made as far as passing law and all these kind of other things?
Yeah. So the main job of the ethics committee is to police the members of the House as far as like filing our financial filings and financial transparency and those kind of things. So that's why it's a big deal to have an even number of Republicans and Democrats on that committee because it's supposed to be even-handed. That's the whole idea is that for it to be fair, should something like that come up. So we nominated Joe White. Joe was when he got elected 2 years ago, was the oldest freshman ever elected. He's a very, very successful businessman. Grew this business from scratch, and wound up when he retired. This is the kind of guy he is. He didn't even sell it. He literally gave it to his
Wow.
employees, like the employees that had been working with him and helped to build it up. He just gave
Wow.
it to them and said, "Here, this is yours now. Divide it up and run it. You earned it." Um, so that's the kind of guy that Joe is, and we nominated him because we felt like it was not in the spirit of the law to have someone who votes like a Democrat and campaigns for Democrats as one of the five representatives of the Republicans on the ethics
Right.
committee. But we were outvoted on that, and that kind of shows where we're at in South Carolina. But the good news there is, like, coming back to the speaker thing. We had 17 votes for Mr. Chumley. We had, I think, 17 or 18 votes for Joe. We uh, 12 years ago, the last time something like this happened, there were five. So we're heading in a good direction slowly because, like you said, people are waking
Right.
up. People are starting to pay attention more than I think they have in a century to state
Right.
politics.
Something that will pull a little fuel to the fire, though, is if people like the people in Pickens County, or the people in Bamberg, when we had the one person who voted against shutting down pornographic websites for underage children,
Mm-hmm.
um, until those things be exposed by the people who live there. Exposing, the Bible says that when things are exposed into the light, they can no longer go back into the dark. We have to
Yep.
expose the things and bring them into the light and bring them into the forefront and bring them onto social media channels. The things, that, hopefully we're heading in the right direction there with freedom of speech on our social media channels as of the past couple days.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
let's shift gears a little bit and talk about closed primaries. That was introduced as a reform idea, and it's been for the past 18 years out without a subcommittee hearing. Why do you think this issue continues to be overlooked, and what steps are you, Jordan, and the Freedom Caucus taking to push this forward here in 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, we're going to talk about it relentlessly. Is one of the things we're going to do. Why hasn't it passed? Well, if you look at South Carolina's recent political history, who was running the show? I mean, for 15 years, there's a guy named Hugh Leatherman, who's a senator from Florence, uh, who who ran most of the state. It was basically his fiefdom. He appointed more people and more things than the governor did. He wrote the budget basically, by himself, a huge chunks of it. And he also owned Florence Concrete Company, which made, I don't know, somewhere between $30 and $50 million from what I can tell in DOT contracts from that budget that
What,
he
building
wrote.
roads and things like
Well,
that?
he
If you're outside
right
of South Carolina,
now
we
he
have concrete roads, if you weren't aware.
only in Florence we do, especially we have really really nice concrete roads in
Right.
Florence County. Well, he got elected as a Democrat 45 years ago when he first got elected. There's several members of the Senate, a few of them are still around, that initially got elected as Democrats. And then they shifted in the 80s with the whole Reagan Revolution. Their policies didn't change, but they recognized the political landscape. And there's frankly a good number of people in the House and the Senate who may not have run as Democrats, but have a good amount of Democrat support that they count on in Republican primaries to stay elected. So, and that's on the state level and even on the federal level, with our maybe our most senior senator who has relied on that in the past. Eh, That's where they won't say it. I mean, you're not going to get anybody to admit
Right.
that from the other side, but every time it's been brought up, tried to be brought up on the floor through an amendment or something like that, it gets squashed. We're going to keep making noise. We're going to refile it. The latest thing is uh, they're trying to push what they're calling a closed primary bill, but it's not. It
Can you
it
just take
does
a
a lot
second
of
to
things.
explain
Yeah.
what a closed primary?
Oh, what is a
Yes.
closed primary? The most basic way to explain a closed primary is that registered Republicans, should vote in Republican primaries in June to determine who the Republican candidate will be in November, and Democrats should vote in Democrat primaries to determine the
Okay.
same thing on
And
their
why
side
would
for the November
anybody
election.
ever want to flop, Jordan? If people are
Mhm.
people, is there what would inspire somebody to vote in a primary that's not of their party?
Yeah, so what we have now is anybody can vote in either one. You just can't vote in both. So if you're in a district that's like 75% Republican, which there are a lot of those here in South Carolina, and you're a Democrat, well, your incentive is not to vote in the Democrat primary. The incentive is to go vote in the Republican primary for the more moderate, more liberal Republican option,
Exactly.
which is why a huge reason why we've wound up where we are, where
Right.
South Carolina was, up until the foundation of the Freedom Caucus, the most liberal Republican state in
Okay,
the
say that
country.
again. South Carolina. Say that statement again. Until
That Up until a couple of years ago when the Freedom Caucus was founded, and one of the reasons we were founded, it was because South Carolina was consistently ranked the most liberal Republican state in the country, like Republican majority state as far as legislative
right.
policies went.
Now, this
Um,
is not
just
foil cap
objectively,
things. People are notorious
no.
for admitting, people admit, even in my own district, admit that they vote for the moderate candidate in a Republican
Oh yeah.
primary with pride, with knowing that it is such an iffy thing to do. Um, it is a thing, and it is why we are where we are now. And there are powers that be that like it that way. And again, like you said, we are no longer a state of first. We weren't the first to pass the ban on pornographic websites and children having access under the age of 18, things like that. We are no longer the state of first. We're not creating first things. We're not first to the table. We're not.
Wait, we are leading the way in subsidizing Green New Deal electric vehicle manufacturing. We are leading the way
Right.
on that. Not something I'm super
No,
proud of.
no, not at all. And if you want to step into that, that's something that you guys are also going to just continue to stir up the fact that we're not taking care of we the people. We're taking care of initiatives and businesses using money from the taxpayers. Um,
Yeah.
so
Businesses that don't agree with our values, with the values of the
exactly,
taxpayers.
exactly.
Yeah.
So South Carolina is also said to have not only the um, most liberal Republican state, but we're said to have had the highest taxes in the Southeast.
Yeah. Objectively, that's true.
What policies are you and the Freedom Caucus going against, and what policies and things are you guys trying to expose to keep the interest of the people in the forefront?
Yeah. So we have the highest income tax in the South. It's 6.2%, and the governor is fairly notorious about getting out there and saying, we have historic tax cuts this year, which is technically true. It's for the last 3 years since 2022, there has been a 0.1% reduction in the state income tax, which is technically historic because there hasn't been one ever prior to that 0.1%. But to your point, that is not bold conservative policymaking. That is being technically correct and trying to score political points. That's not what we need. That doesn't help
Right.
anybody. I'm happy to take that $37 a year that it saves, or whatever the amount is, for the average taxpayer. But in order to be competitive with our neighbors, like Georgia is a full percentage point lower than ours. North Carolina's is more than that and heading even lower. Florida's at zero, Tennessee's at zero, Texas is at zero. So like our competitive neighbors, especially those fast growing states, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, have 0% income tax. And we can do the same thing if we cut spending. Uh, as a ratio of our GDP, like our economy, the size of our economy compared to the size of our state government, we are 50% larger. Like our state government is 50% larger than all of our neighbors as a ratio of our economy. So most southern states, their government is about 8% of of the size of their economy. Ours is at
Hmm.
12. So we can cut in theory 50% of the size of our government in one way, or there's a lot of ways we can do that. And if we were to do it, we could slash our income tax to zero, which is what we should do and what we have to do to be competitive with our neighboring states. And what's morally correct, like in the Bible, there are only a handful of taxes that God gives his blessing for governments to collect, and the income tax is not one of them. In fact, it's there's pretty strong argument from Deuteronomy, I can't say that word, from the law. We'll just say that, like from the law, that um, taxing people's wages is not an acceptable thing. It's certainly not acceptable from a judicial
Right.
standpoint. Like it's explicitly banned under Levitical law to take away. The example it gives is a miller's stone that he uses to mill
Right.
grain because it takes away his livelihood. You can kill him, like if he commits a murder, he can be executed, but you can't take away his
Right.
means of providing a living for
Now, there is
himself.
a lot
And that's effectively what
in
the income
social
tax
media
does.
world. There's a lot of video circulating around from university professors and folks
Hmm.
that actually there's no United States legal code that protects the government from taking income tax. Uh,
Well, that's a
the
federal
federal, right,
thing. That's above my
right,
pay grade. But on the
right,
state level, like the states have police powers. In theory, they
right,
can constitutionally, but they shouldn't. And I would argue morally they shouldn't. And from a utilitarian standpoint, all the states that have ditched their income tax have a much higher quality of life and higher economic growth rates. Because I've taught to businesses outside of politics in my real estate life, how I actually make a living for my family. I help small businesses find space, and people that come from Tennessee and Texas, whether it's attracted to the port or they have family here, they get hit with this, not only the income tax but the corporate income tax. We have the highest business property tax the second highest in the
wow,
country, behind West Virginia. It's like 13.2% of all the property that the business owns. But if you're Boeing, if you're Michelin, if you're Volvo, like if you're one of these big international companies that have a strong lobbyist arm, they get exemptions and workarounds to a lot of these burdensome taxes and regulations. So that's something we want to look at. To your question about the income tax, yeah, I refiled my bill to eliminate it entirely. I also refiled my bill to adjust the income tax brackets so no one pays any income tax if they make less than $1 million a year, to help get us in that direction. And here's the good news: we've been talking about eliminate the income tax as a caucus for years, but as a movement, kind of the conservative movement in South Carolina. I mean, since I used to work for Governor Sanford in the Tea Party days, people were saying we need to eliminate the income tax in South Carolina. Well, now it's finally catching on. Leadership and kind of their surrogates of leadership have been publicly talking about. Uh, well, it started as we got to eliminate the income tax over the next 10 years. I haven't heard that in the last couple of weeks. Most recently, it's turned into, well, maybe we need to cut it to like 3.5% from where it's at now, which is good. That's a good direction. I'm encouraged by that, and I think that shows that the Freedom Caucus model of us staking out the claim, of we want this thing that the voters have said that they wanted, and pushing and not backing down from that, has moved the Overton window of things, the perspective of even the moderates in leadership, to say, all right, this is something we have to do because the people are
right,
demanding it, and that's kind of the whole function of our existence as a
right.
caucus.
Okay, so a vision for the future. This is January. I did planning with my children the other day. We set goals. We set
Mm-hmm.
smart goals. My children are as entrepreneurial as I am. We are on Facebook Marketplace flipping things, and they have a
That's
goal
awesome.
to flip to $1,000 in a year. My second to young, I've got four. My second to youngest wants to learn how to swim. Has some other big goals, and by this date and this date, my son wants to make the All-Star team again. He wants to pitch a certain
Nice.
speed, all these things. My daughter wants to be able to run a certain distance without stopping, all these kind of things. And we have measurable goals, and we know that there are time limits on things, and we have accountability, and it's achievable, yet it's something we have to strive for. As people are beginning to plan for their families and for the future of their children, because I'm planning for the future of my
Mm-hmm.
children, um, I subscribe to the Freedom Caucus newsletter. I'm going to put that link into the show notes of this podcast. That helps me kind of keep in alignment with what's going on and what you guys are discussing as a group. And we have to align ourselves to say, okay, I'm going to make it a plan that I'm going to check in with my representative. And if your representative doesn't answer the phone for you, leave them a voicemail and tell them, hey, you've lost a vote, and remind them that they work for you.
Maybe give them a couple chances to call you back.
All right, you're more forgiving than me.
I mean, that's
all right. Give them a couple of chances. Leave them a voicemail. Let them know how every way that you can get back with them. They can text you, all that kind of stuff. Send them emails, all that kind of stuff.
But yeah, if they're ignoring you,
that's a problem. Vision for the future. Know what's on the table for this year as far as policies and things that are being introduced to the House. Things that, because there's not everything's going to get there to the floor. A few things will, and a lot of things will get shelved, all that kind of stuff. Stay in tune, but hold your, one of your goals for the year, we need grassroots support to hold these lawmakers accountable for what's being introduced at the state level. And if we can do that, we can start to begin to add the pressure and make that a part of our yearly and our daily lives or, monthly lives. Then we can begin to take back, what we've relinquished. We've relinquished all control and said, hey, we don't really have any accountability out there for you except for a small group of people, but we need this to rise up. So what is your word for 2025 for these people to pick up that grassroots support? What is the vision for what that looks like? What kind of constituent support do you need throughout 2025 to see some more success?
Yeah, we're working on some initiatives to help people engage. Like I have a lot of people asking, what can I do as an individual? We're working on something. Yesterday, I was working with some of my colleagues about it. We're going to try to launch it the next few weeks to give an active role to people who want to get involved, who want to help us research bills, who want to coordinate in their neighborhoods, like you were saying, to get people connected with their representatives and communicate with their representatives. So we're working on that. We're working on a potential in-person event, and I can't disclose a whole lot of details about that yet, but coming this spring, there may be an opportunity for a lot of us to physically get together, an opportunity that hasn't happened like this in some years. And like you said, check in with our South Carolina Freedom Caucus email Substack. We're doing some upgrades to the website. We're trying to figure that out. As Josh can tell you, I am not a technically savvy individual. My iPhone is about as advanced as I can operate, despite my age and generation. And the Freedom Caucus is actually going to be launching a podcast itself. It's not something I'm going to be running, but some of our members are going to kind of take the lead on that to specifically talk about, here's the bills that happened this week, here's what's coming up next week. Pretty short abbreviated thing, but just to be able to communicate as much as possible. But also, like you said, join if you can find a group near you that's meeting and talking about politics, whether it's at your church, in your neighborhood, do that. That's how the American Revolution started. Back in the 1770s, before there was a declaration, before there was a Continental Congress, there were these little correspondence committees in taverns, in churches, in homes. And they would write to each other. They would discuss things with each other. The Sons of Liberty in Charleston and Boston, like that's the kind of grassroots organization it takes to maintain or to reestablish the liberties that we once had and to maintain them. It costs time, effort, and money to do all that, not just votes.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in for episode 25 in the beginning of the second season of the Current Situation podcast. We may not be as frequent this season. Things are picking up for a busy year, but we promise to deliver kind of what's going on across the state, kind of give some insight, some input, and what we can do to support these grassroots efforts and keep you guys informed on what's going on. I'll put some more contact information for Jordan for the Freedom Caucus Substack newsletter and all that in the show notes. But again, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you, and we look forward to sharing more with you in the coming weeks and months.